Good morning, Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We are on page 1285. Aleph Reish Pei Hey. And the Rebbe Rashab, we concluded the paragraph on top of page 1285. The Rebbe Rashab explaining the first level that we're talking about, Hu Shmoi, Shem Havaya, which is in the highest levels, Gili La'atzmei. So there's a revelation, especially the Yudke. But the revelation is to himself that even that is for the purpose of existence. And therefore, all of Ishtalshalos, even though it doesn't exist yet before the Tzimtzum, but it is in some way encompassed there and in a concealed fashion. To explain that, he elaborated on page 1284 and 85 that we learned that this is scholars we see throughout all of Ishtalshalos, where mides, emotions are encompassed in the mind is encompassed in that which is higher than intellect, Ratzon and Tainug. The Ratzon and Tainug is encompassed in the root of Ratzon and Tainug, of desire and pleasure. The same thing in the spheres above, that Zah, the mides, are encompassed in Bina and in Chachma, and that's encompassed in Chachma, Stima, and Keser. And the Ratzon and Tainug of Keser is encompassed in the Mocker of Chachma, the Mocker of it, which is even higher. Atikim and Helen Ba'atzmus Hamaitzel Shalamayim B'chinas Keser Datzilus, all the way to Ak, that encompasses everything, and all the way to before the Tzimtzum. So the lowest level before the level of the Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, as it relates and beginning to envision existence, Hayakol Ba'atzmus Ein Sof, and comes with the Gili Ba'atzmusei, Kishabab Machshavti V'Ritzene HaPoshet. Kol Ba'atzmusei, Bali de Gili Ba'atzmusei. Yeah. So all, therefore, we can say that everything is encompassed in levels that are higher. However, as we learned, it's not just encompassed in the same quantitative manner, but in a very different quality. The higher you go, the more abstract and the more sublime it gets. Like he said, the mides in Seichel, for instance, are more tangible. They're mitzias, at least. There's something there, as opposed to how Seichel, intelligence, is encompassed in the superconsciousness of the koyach hamaskil, the power to conceive ideas. Where there, you don't have existent intelligence yet. It's just the power of intelligence, the power to conceive, as he explained at the bottom of page 1284. Okay, so that's a quick summary of this idea. So we see here that to the highest levels, you have already a relationship, at least in a very subtle way, with the existence. But now he's going to qualify and say all this is the level of Gili and Ein Sof. Remember, there's Hu, Shmoi. The level of Hu, however, is fundamentally concealed, and that is a level that's higher. So we're going to go now to that to understand what that means. Okay. But just in case anybody has any questions, yesterday I explained and elaborated pretty extensively on this topic. So I'm going to go over that again. That's all recorded. But if there's any questions about what I just said, let's pause for a moment. If not, I'll just go straight into the next paragraph on page 1285. Okay. So, now, however, all this, hu b'chinas hagili de Ein Sof, gam be'Ein Sof shalifnei Tzimtzum. All this is relating to the level of Gili, where there's some revelation. Yes, there's no other there. There's no zulas. There's no other. But it's still a state of some type of revelation, some type of Gili. Going back to what he spoke about at the bottom of page 1282, when he started talking about the difference between the shamis and mitzvahs. So he said, there's a level of Hu and a level of Shmoi. Ato Hu Havai levadecha. So he says, the level of Hu, he called that a helam be'etzem, not a helam shalagili, not something that's concealed right now and then will be revealed. For example, like the seichel, the emotions are concealed in the excitement within the cognitive, or the other ways, all the other levels, that the intellect is encompassed and concealed in the power of intelligence or Ratzon and Tainug, that superconsciousness, but there it's a Helam that will be revealed, like we said, Helam of a Gili. It then emerges and becomes, reveals that which was concealed. But now we're talking about something Ein Begeder Gili Klal. We learned that this is a level that defies expression altogether. It's completely fundamentally not in the world of Gili. The Ein Begeder Makar Klal. And it's not in the domain, and even in the even the domain of a source. You can't even call it a source. The other levels we spoke about, everything has a source. The source is higher, more sublime. Even when he said about Yesh Ma'ayin of Chachmas Timah, from Chachma Ma'ayin to Motz on the top of the page. She said it's a Savas Yesh Ma'ayin, but it's still relative. There is still a relationship between Chachmas Timah and Chachma Gluya. They're both called Chachma. It's a distant relationship, but it's a relationship. Here we're talking, you can't call it Gili Klal and not Makar Klal. Ein Shaykh Leim so I will begin this Helam Shein Beged the Gili Klal, Ein Beged the Makar Klal, which is not even in the realm of Gili. Not only is it not revealed, it's not even Shaykh to be revealed. You can't even reveal. And not even in the Geder and realm of source. Ein Shaykh Leim Shenimtza Kol Sham Gam Behelam B'Yeser. There you cannot say what we just said at length, that it's encompassed there, even in the most concealed way. You can't say that. Ein Shaykh Leim. It's not even possible to say that because it's completely removed in that sense. So Shenimtza Kol Sham Gam Behelam B'Yeser, to say that it's encompassed there, even in a very concealed way. You know, you could say maybe it's so concealed, it's very concealed. No, because the whole state is not related. That state of being is completely not in the realm of revelation, not in the realm of a source. And now he's going to explain what this means. Now, obviously, there's a question that jumps out immediately, and I need to mention it. I'm sure some of you may be thinking of it. So what's the purpose of this level then? You know, Atzmus, we said Ata is higher than Helam and Gili, higher even than this level of Helam Be'etzem, completely beyond all these levels. So what's the purpose of this Helam if it doesn't have any relationship with what comes afterwards? Nevertheless, he's saying it very clearly that it's not in the same realm at all. So we're going to answer this question. This is obviously going to be an important point in understanding what it accomplishes. And I already answered it, if you may recall. I already spoke about it, because it gives us a taste of what Etzem is like in the world of Helam and Gili. But I'll get into it more detail. Right now, he's not explaining it, but I just wanted to make sure that that question is on the table. Now he's going to explain what is the difference between the two. So he says, Va'inyan hu. The inyan in this is, like it's written elsewhere, the kol shu b'chinas gili eir, that everything that's in a state of revelation, a revelation is some form of expression, hagam she'agiluhu rak la'atzmei, even though the revelation is only to himself and not to anyone else. Like we learned, this can be your own inner secret. No one else knows it, but you're aware of it. Even in that case, yovi lidei gili l'zulase gamken. It will come ultimately to some a revelation also to another. Why? Because v'hainu. This means the ma'acher shu b'chinas gili be'etzem, meaning that it is already entered the realm and is fundamentally in a state of revelation, meaning even if it's not revealed to you and it's complete secret at this point and completely concealed, but since it's in the world of gili be'etzem, meaning it's a fundamental state of gili, yesh le'shaychus ala gili lahazulas. So it has a relationship also to revelation to another, because just a matter of how revealed it is. In other words, the word revelation, or I like to use the word awareness, or the word consciousness. If something has entered the world of consciousness, even though it's only conscious, or you're the only one that's conscious of it, but it's now entered that realm. Because it entered that realm, so it's not just a matter of time, so it's a matter of, it's already in the world of Gili. So Shaykhis ala Gili ala Azulas. It has some relationship with the Gili Azulas, because both of them are about expression and awareness and consciousness. If something didn't enter into the world of consciousness, so it's not conscious to you, it's not conscious to anyone. If it's already entered into consciousness, therefore, ultimately, he's going to also have a relationship with another. I'll just give an example for it from the famous story. They told the story of the Beis Yosef. I heard it with the Magid. I heard the story with 3 different people. I mean, I never really researched it, but it's a very powerful story. That the Arizal or Beis Yosef, whoever, was teaching something to his students. And they were learning a very complex passage in Gemara. And he said a Chiddush. I think the story is also with the Magid, if I recall, Magid of Mizrich. And he said a Chiddush, and the students who are great scholars themselves, were really taken. They never heard such an innovation. Wow, powerful. They saw it as like an unprecedented revelation. Okay. And they each went back to their respective homes, traveling back. And one of them was in a base medrash between Mincha and Ma'ariv. There was a shiur in this Gemara. And he sees a relatively simple person teaching the Gemara to a group. And he says the same chiddush that he just heard from the Maggid. And he's like very bewildered, very puzzled. Here is a chiddush that they knew that clearly the students were such scholars, they knew, well, this was not a chiddush that was easy. It took the Maggid to say such a chiddush. And here a simple guy in a shul is saying the same chiddush. So he went and when he had the opportunity, asked the Maggid, what's going on? So the Maggid explained that once you break through and you pierce this world of consciousness with a chiddush, so even though not everybody on earth heard it, but it's now entered the realm of this world, Aveda Elam, and therefore it's going to be easier for others who learn the Gemara to come to it even easily. If it wasn't introduced altogether, so nobody would come to it. It's a very fascinating concept, which also in many ways explains a lot of ideas, even in scientific discovery and technology, that you see, especially by the Industrial Revolution, a certain time that there was a burst of more knowledge and more innovation in a period of 50, 100 years than the previous 1,000 years. So even though innovations happen, but then there was some type of like completely disproportionate revolution. So we know the Zohar says that in the year Tov Kuf, which corresponds to 1840, there would be an explosion in the wisdom below and the wisdom above, the whole thing.
Tov.
I said, yeah, Tov Resh, which corresponds to 1840. Yeah. So, but if you think about it, seemingly innovation should happen in a very progressive way, incrementally. Because, people learn things, there's innovation, next generation more. So, but when you understand this concept, that when someone introduces a new energy, a new idea, that it changes the very atmosphere of existence. So even though many people are not aware of it, but now it's opened up the door, like Posach Chassidus. So Chassidus explains why it says in Zohar, Posach. It says the idea. So it says, Posach va'omar. What means Posach? He opened up and said. So Posach Chassidus, he opened a new channel. That a new channel opens up, so and everyone in the world is affected by it. I want to use this to explain. I remember in the year 20, when we entered the new millennium, the year 2000, 22 years ago. So I was asked by, it was a journalist that asked me a question. He said, it's interesting. You look at, for example, the top 100 people, all the magazines and newspapers were printing the top 100 people in the last millennium, from the year 1000 to the year 2000. And interestingly, you look at all those 100 and you ask a Torah-id and ask him, who are your 100 top people? They're not, no one in common. Like nobody in the top 100 mentions Rashi, the Rambam, the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov, the Vilna Gaon, whoever. And in the top 100 of the secular world are very different. The only Jews there are Bob Dylan and Einstein and Freud and people like that. So it's a real discrepancy. It's like two different universes. Who are the top people? So I said to him, I told him this story. I said to him, how do you know that maybe these 100 in the Jewish world, like Avram Avinu, they opened up channels that no one else knew about except the insiders. And that allowed all these innovations of the 100 that you're describing that everyone recognizes. But who opened up the door to these Chedushim? Maybe the Rambam and the Rashi and all the different great sages. So they did it through Torah. But once they opened up that door, maybe that allowed for so many innovations in music and art and literature and so on and so forth. He liked the answer, actually. So the point being is, just going back to our discussion, that once something enters into the stratosphere of consciousness, so even though B'Poel Mamish is the only one that's conscious is the person himself, but it's entered the world of Gili. And once it's in the world of Gili, it's Shaykh also to the Gili al-Azula. So it didn't happen yet. It's a concept in Halacha, Mechusa Maisa, or Mechusa Zman. It's just a matter of time, a matter of action. But fundamentally, it's in the world of Gili. That's when you're talking about the level of Gili, of Shmoy, of Avaya. The Bechlolus, Hurak Bechinas Ahelam Shalagili. Because Bechlolus, is still concealed, but in general, this is still a state of concealment relative to the Gili. Like I mentioned, it's not revealed this moment, but it's capable of being revealed. And in many ways, that is a sense of revelation. So it's true, it's a revelation only la'atzmai, but it's a helam shalagili, which means that right now it's concealed, but it's just a matter of opening up the chest, opening up the closet, learning a little more, and you reveal that which was there. It's like the example he brings in Basalagani. I mentioned chapter 16, I believe it is. Later, when he talks about Lamai Lamai Aden Ketz, Lamata Mata Aden Tachlis. I'm just connecting it since this year. So chapter 16, what does he say? He says it's the difference between Makif of Erchez and Makif Yosh, and he gives an example. That there are things that the teacher teaches that are concealed from the student right now. But it's not just a matter of time. 40 years, he'll start to understand. He'll come to understand. Because it was a helam shalagili. It's not fundamentally concealed. It's concealed from the student because the student now is learning Ayin Beis or Mishnayos or Gemara, whatever. But within it is embedded because it already entered the realm of Gili. That's what he explains there. But then he says there's a level that is, I'm not actually reading from the very chapter. So then he says there's a level, I just want to read it. Shem sosum be'etzem. And as much as the kol masha maskil mischakim amashpia b'zeh afshu masiga maskil by hine lias the close amusa erzel betnu de salmus hine gamashu misgalalav or nivdul misalam batzmuse. That something remains fundamentally concealed. You can check it out in chapter 16. It says that's the difference between lamata mata adein tachlis and lamay lamala adein ketz. These two different levels of helam. So one can be, it's revealed, it's concealed, but it could be revealed. So he says, B'chlolas, this is the level of helam shalagili. Umemela shaykh leimer, and therefore it's mela automatically shaykh to say, not automatic, memela, and therefore it compels us to say that's possible to say shagili al azulus nimtza kol by behelam. That this gili to himself, in it is encompassed the revelation that will ultimately come to the other. Is kol boy behelam is kol in the gili la'atzme. That's what he said. He's scholarless. Why? Because they're both in the realm of gili. V'hamshochi rak gili mehelam loy davar chadash. And the hamshocha that actually transmits is a gili, is a revelation of a concealed state, not a davar chadash. It's not a new revelation because it's already entered the world of gili, of awareness, of consciousness, and just a matter of revealing it. That's what he says here. The Kamoy Kain, now he's going back. How is this applied to Lifnei Tzimtzum? The Kamoy Kain, who Lifnei Tzimtzum b'chinas etzem ha'oyer. Now we're talking about etzem ha'oyer, not the helam. The etzem ha'oyer, that is not yet his pashto said. It's not yet going to another. That the core energy, the Ayin Beis Ein Sof shekedem alei saratzon. The Ein Sof that precedes alei saratzon. It has not yet become an active desire for existence. Being that, so to speak, it's revealed to himself. It's not yet become a ratzon that is associating with another. it has already a relationship with the extension of this revelation of this Oyer, with all Ba'atzmuseh. In other words, Yud-K has a connection to Vav-K. So even though Yud-K is a Gilui La'atzmei, he's not yet considering how he's going to transmit to the Makabel. Remember the expression that he used, Yud-K is Vav-K, he said that one is Meir La'atzmei or Mashameir La'atzmei Eir HaShayach La'elemis. So one is that it's all revealed within himself, but he's not yet considering the other. And the other is that. So, but it has a relationship because it's already in the world of Gili, Akaponim Gili La'atzmei. I'm just going back because I remember that the Kedem Alei Sarotzen, for some reason, I remember associating it with the Helam Be'etzem, but clearly no, there's two levels then. Kedem Alei Sarotzen means it's not yet coming to a Rotzen Goloi relating to existence, like the lower level of Ein Sof, which is where he's already envisioning existence. It's still just a consideration within the Gili La'atzmei. Okay. Well, and therefore, Gam be'etzem ha'oyer, yesh b'chinas sfiris. And that's why also in the etzem ha'oyer, there's sfiris. Rak, shein sfiris adein ketz. However, there's spheres without a limit. They're not yet 10 hidden spheres. It's like we spoke about the artist. He's already come to the point he wants to be an artist. But right now it's infinite amount of spheres. He can infinite types of art. It's not yet come to Esses spheres hagnuzis, the actual 10 spheres that God envisions from the infinite possibilities. He chooses the 10 hidden spheres. That's already the Hispashtus Sa'ir. So, but also Netzema the Sfiris Adein Ketz. He said this also earlier, I believe. Yeah, the end of paragraph on page 1283. He said it clearly. The root of Sevav Chalab. So this is still all Gilui in Lifnei Tzimtzum itself, two levels. One a Gilui La'atzmei, and one is a Gilui La'atzmei as he's considering the other existence. So there's Svidus Enketz. Ayin Beis, he says now, Bedrush Yom Tov Shalosh Hashanah. He's now referring us to the drush of Samach Vav, which he already mentioned a few times. Mentioned on the end of the paragraph, end of chapter, at the end of the paragraph 1283, and before that, the paragraph, I believe, it was a few places. I think also two pages before, I remember. Okay. So now he's referring us, what does he say in Samach Vav? He says, the B'chinas Etzem Ha'er V'Hispashtus Sa'er, that these two levels, the Etzem Ha'er, which is Gili, but it's himself, and Hispashtus extension, Zeu Inyan B'chinas Echad V'Kadmen. So in general, Chassidus, they talk about three levels, Yochid, Echad, and Kadmen. Yochid is the highest level, which clearly here is probably referring to the Helam Ba'etzem. Echad is, so Yochid is oneness, complete Yochid. There's nothing else. Echad means one, and Kadma means the first, preceding everything else. So Chassidus explains that Yochid is the highest, completely removed. Echad is already one, and there will be and Kadman means before the next, so it's closer. So Echad and Kadman, Echad is more Etzem Ha'er, it's a Gili La'atzmei, with the 10 hidden spheres. It's like before there's, and Kadman is already also Machshava Hagduma or Ratzon HaKodem, the primordial desire, but it's a desire that's already relating to and envisioning existence. So you're just adding this point, just perhaps to create a little more clarity which levels they are, Echad and Kadman. Okay. This is all the level of Gili, the realm of consciousness. Now he's going back to who? But the level of Helam Ha'er, and not Helam Shel HaGilui, fundamental Helam, Shalamayla Meged Gili Legamri. That's completely beyond the realm and domain of conscious revelation altogether. Hari Mitzad Madregazu, due to this, from it's possible. It's possible that based on this level, due to this from this the perspective of this level, it's possible there won't be any gili. No revelation, not to himself and not to another, because its whole identity is one that's beyond consciousness, beyond gili altogether. As his writes about it at length, in B'dibra Masel, Samach to Samach, Reish Nun Zayin, Tov Reish Nun Zayin. The Maimer Samach to Samach, that the Rebbe Rashab said at the Frierdiker Rebbe's wedding, in Tov Reish Nun Zayin, which is 1897. So Elul, the Frierdiker Rebbe, got married, and the Rebbe Rashab, that was the same time he established Temchet Mimim in those days, right in the days after the wedding. Yud Gimel Elul was not, the Frierdiker Rebbe's marriage was Tezvov Elul. No, Yud Gimel Elul, I'm sorry, Yud Gimel. Yeah, so Tov Reish Nun Zayin, 1897. So he said a long hemshech called Samach to Samach Reim Ahuvim, famous hemshech. So he's referring us there. There he talks about the state that's higher than Gili, and it's possible that it shouldn't go to Gili, not to himself, Leila Atzmi, not to himself, and not to another. The Mela B'chinazu ain't a shaykh hiskalos. So therefore, in this type of level, you can't call hiskalos. You can't say that within is encompassed a lower level, because that lower level may never come from it. Till now, we were talking about levels. Yes, they're in a higher state, a lower state, but basically one leads to the next. They're part of a hishtalshalos, part of a link. They're all linked in a continuity. Here, you can't call the ena shaykh hiskalos. And therefore, this is higher than halos man, the aveda from below, that we said reaches and touches the levels of Gili, because the Gili is the tzedek ha'elemis. Because ultimately, even the highest level of Gili is for the purpose of existence and will ultimately come to existence. But here we're talking about a level that's completely beyond consciousness, beyond revelation. So it's higher than Allah's man. V'hamshachem misham. And when there is hamshachem from there, hu b'chinas er chadash. It's something new. Because it's not something that's waiting to be revealed. It's not in that state. If something comes from there, it's completely new. It's not a Gilead Hela. It's not revealing that which was concealed. So you see from this that there is Amshacha from there. We have to understand how and what makes it happen. But the level on its own, and here we're talking before Avodah, the level on its own is removed completely from revelation. That's the level of who. A little later, we're going to learn this is where neshamas are rooted. The next paragraph is going to be where that mitzvahs are rooted in this level of Gilui, Shmoy, have Avaya. That's why mitzvahs, the letters Yud Kei Vav Kei. But I don't want to go to the next paragraph before we stop here. If there are any questions on this paragraph.
Yeah,
you can't say that about Atto. You can't say that about Atto.
1 second.
At all.
One at a time. One at a time.
I just want to say you can't say the same thing about Atto as you say about who. There's only who.
Atto, you can't even call Helam, because Atto is not even in the realm of concealment. It's completely not revealed, not concealed. That's why Atto is here. We could say there's an Eibush that says in Taira Shem Shemayim Shogah B'fikol. Everybody says, Baruch Hashem, thank God, because Atzmus is a level that's not concealed and not revealed. It's completely beyond the two.
So who?
He said that, 1 second. He said that at the bottom of page 1282. I'm just reading. This discussion altogether is not there. So Atzmus is both, yeah, that's what he says, which needs also explanation what that means exactly. But that's what he says there, yeah.
So the B'chinas who is a elam be'etzem, etzem o'el she'enu b'chinas gilui klal. And this is, but he said here that Hezra Shaykhis is not going on who.
I don't understand what you're saying. You just said it.
No, right now,
to Gili at all.
So, but he explained here that every time when we have an oil, even if it's not Shaykhis, it's already a Shaykhis. That's not talking about who.
I didn't say oir. He says Gilui. Didn't say the word oir.
Okay, Gilui. But the who is not.
So I already explained. So once what you're asking me, why is who called etzem oir?
No, I'm asking if the who is.
He just said who is not shaykhs begeder gilui, and it could never come. It's possible it shouldn't come gilui la'atzme and gilui l'zalose. Correct.
Oh, so okay. So why is it called etzem oil, Takir?
So I explained earlier, there's two ways to understand Etzem Ha'oyer. There's Etzem Ha'oyer as in Etzem Ha'oyer, Etzem Ha'gilui, and Etzem Ha'oyer, Etzem Inyan of Eibishter being Mamshech something, which is Lav Dafke Shaychus to Gilui. I explained this a few classes back. Here, he's using Etzem Ha'oyer in the gather of Gilui, not Gilui. Here he doesn't use Etzem Ha'oyer on Helam. Helam be'etzem. You don't see the word Etzem Ha'oyer. He used it earlier, he did. So I explained there that he went over. There's Etzem Ha'oyer, Etzem Ha'gilui, and there's Etzem Ha'oyer as Etzem, something that the Eibishter says Mamshech, which is Helam be'etzem. It's like the difference between L'mayla Mayla, Aden Ketz, and L'mata Mata, Aden Tachlis. They're both Eid Ein Sof. He does say it's Eid Ein Sof. However, it's the Helam Etzem in Eid. Yeah.
In Reish Pei Beis, he is calling it Etzem Ha'oyer she'eino.
I explained the difference. There's a very clear difference. One is Begeder Gili and one is not. Eid does not always mean Gili. Eid could be just Amshocha that's not Atzmos. It's not Atzmos, but it's not Gili. Okay.
So this is a level of Helam Ha'or that's not shaykh like Gilui Bichlal. Is that correct?
That's exactly the words the Rebbe Rashab says a few times. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
But you see, he clearly says there could be a Hamshacha from there, but it's going to be a Ur Chodesh. We will learn about that. But
yeah, no, I get it. He's setting it up so we understand.
If you're learning Basi Legani, he literally says this about the Oitzer, Lamaila, that there's an Oitzer that's not revealed. Even the king himself doesn't even access it. It's completely concealed. And that he calls Lamaila Mala Adin Ketz, Helam Be'etzem. He uses the same, that's why I said the Basi Legani, those chapters, which actually this chapter 12 that we're learning this year is the beginning of this subject matter, where he speaks about Lamaila Adin Ketz, Helam Acher Helam, all the way Helam Be'etzem. He actually uses those words. If you look in chapter 16, I think he even says, let me just see the actual words. He says, yeah. V'yesh hefresh gadol beineim. I'm looking at chapter 16 in Basi Legani. That Erein Sof Lamaila Adin Ketz, Lamaila Adin Ketz. He's madreges be'erein Sof Baruch Hu. V'yesh hefresh gadol beineim. Let me read it for a moment. The Masheres of Lamaila Mala Adin Ketz Ha'er Hanelam V'Hasasum She'ena Begeder Glili V'Hamshach. It's a concealed and covered up light, and a Begeder Gili V'Hamshach. Ula'elam Lo Yavi Begeder Gili La'elamis, and will never become revealed to the world. And he goes on to explain Stima Dechol Stimin Shusasum Be'etzem, fundamentally concealed. It's at least in the realm of Gili. I mean, it's almost this. I can't say exactly, but these are exactly the same words he's using. And he goes on to explain this in more detail. So definitely chapter 16, which is, as I said, a continuation of chapter 12, this year's chapter, is all about this topic.
This is fascinating because he's talking here about even the oil shelifnei tzimtzum, but it's b'chinas gilui, shekoidem lo yisalotzay. מאחר שהוא בחינס גילוי לעצמו, כביכול יש לו שייכות לבחינס הספשטוס האויר.
Yeah.
And before he's talking about ainoi b'chinas it's gilui לעצמו, but ainoi etzem ha'oil.
That's why I explained. That's why you have to understand. Remember, I go back to what I explained the other day. For us, these are hard concepts to wrap our head around because we start from the bottom up. Everything we experience is revealed. We start our lives with our sensory stimulation, what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we touch, what we smell. So for us to start understanding things that are concealed takes effort. But remember, Mamayla Lamata, it's the exact opposite. Nothing existed. there was no consciousness. There was no awareness. The whole concept of being aware of something and conscious of something is a creation. Atzmus is completely beyond it all. So first he created, so to speak, he emanated an oir that is beyond consciousness altogether. Atzmus is beyond consciousness and beyond consciousness and non-consciousness. And then he emanated a level that is at least consciousness is there, the Geder of Gili. Because in order to create existence like ours, we need both. And just to add a little point to all of this, remember this, the Gili of Elikus, even the highest levels that he's talking, is in order for us to be a Gili for us, that we should relate, we should be able to experience godliness. If we only had Helam Be'etzem, let's say you only had Ata and Hu, Atzmus and the Helam Be'etzem, it would not, we on our terms, would never be able to experience godliness because there'd be no experience. Like he said in the previous chapter about Atzilus, Atzilus lets us know about God, lets us feel godliness. If you don't have Yediyah and Asaga and emotions, so yes, you could say your Etzam and Neshama is connected, but we want it to be revealed. And in this world, revelation is critical. On the other hand, we want it to be an Atzmizdika connection, not just a revealed connection. That's why I keep citing from Tanya. On one hand, the neshama is connected, the etzem, to its father, like a child to the etzem of the moyach ha'av, but that's an atzmizdika thing. It could be not revealed. Father and son could never communicate even with each other. When you do Torah and mitzvahs, you're embracing the father, you're embracing the king, because the mitzvahs is already a level of gilui of what the Eibishter wants. What does he want from us? So the rotzen atzmi of mitzvahs and Torah and mitzvahs is what he wants to express. In the words of Basar Legani, Lamata Mata Aden Tachlis expresses the Gilui. Ein Sof is Nimshach, is drawn, extends all the way down, all the way into this world, as this chapter 12 discusses, revealing the divine in everything. Then comes the work to reveal it, but it's there. Lamaila Maila Aden Ketz is revealing to us the grandeur, the mystique of Atzmus, the mystique of Elikus, how God is beyond structure, how God is beyond Gili. And you need both of them. I don't know if any of you heard my program last night. I spoke about this chapter 12, and I asked the question, why is the Rebbe in the Maimer 1962, Tavshin Chav Beis, he emphasizes so much that Oyer doesn't just have Me'ein HaMoyer similar to the Moyer in Ein Sof, but also Ein Tchila, that the Oyer also carries Mitziyusi Matzmusei, the Atzmus, that is that has no cause and no siba, which is transferred into this world, that we, the yesh, had to be created by Atzmus because we too don't feel that we have a source. Why is the Rebbe insisting that it's an oir? And seemingly that's the level of Lamai Lamaila Aden Ketz, not Lamatamat Aden Tachlis. So I tried to explain that the point is because you really want to have both. Even in the Giluyim that we want to have also an element of Atzmi and Helam. That's completely removed. And vice versa. The etzem you want ultimately to become out begili. So ultimately we're going to learn that we need both these levels because the Helam reveals the distance, the infinite distance of Atzmus that you think you got him figured out. No, he's completely beyond you. He's Helam be'etzem. On the other hand, the Eibishter wants a dira b'tachtenim. He wants us to experience godliness. So that's why you need the gilui. You need to understand God. You need to feel God. But then when you get too close and you think you got it all figured out, you need to be reminded that there are things that are fundamentally beyond. And that's part of the relationship. Remember, it's part of the relationship. We live in a world of acquisitions and we want power, control. You have to come to understand, like what Hashem told Moshe, you can see me only when you stop looking. Lo yireini adam v'chai, but then he says, v'reisas acherei uponei lo yiro, as the Rebbe explains, and it's also, we found it also now from the Baal HaFla, in his Pirush on the Torah. What's it called? The Pirush of the Torah is
Panim Yafis or
Panim Yafis. Panim Yafis and Pasha Kisisa. That what does the Eibishter say? Reisas acherei uponai. You'll see my back and my face, but my face you'll see by lo yiro, by not looking. In other words, The idea that we own godliness, that it's on our terms, is critical because it has to be internalized. As we're going to learn, that's b'chol moedecha, mesiras nefesh, and the kavana that we internalize it. But at the same time, we and God are not the same level. You also have to always remember there's parts of God that are completely beyond. I mean, I've given the example in Lahavdil, if you want, Kavyachal in marriage. In marriage, part of the beauty of a true relationship is that there's an element of ahava, closeness, understanding each other on deep levels, intimately. But there's also an element of respecting the mystique. It's like ahava and yira. You also have to have a certain element of respecting the mystery of your spouse. And when you embrace that, and don't think you have to figure it all out and have it all understood, that's when you really have a full relationship. So the true relationship is a combination of closeness and relationship, but also a combination of a certain awe and reverence and respect for something beyond. And it's not a contradiction. The Helam Be'etzem is not meant to just be concealed. It's meant to teach us that the Eibishter has really elements that are completely beyond us. And that too is a relationship when you understand that. If you convince yourself that the Eibishter is on your terms, then you only have one half of him. You have the way the Eibishter relates to you, like Mamala Kalam, or even Sevav Kalam. But to have the Etzem, you have to recognize there's also that beyond. And the combination of both, the Helam and the Gilui, is ultimately what Ato is. It's beyond both, and therefore can manifest in both. And our relationship with God is on both levels. And the resistance we have is because we want to know everything. But you know something? Part of knowing everything is knowing what you don't know and respecting that there are things that are not in the realm of knowledge. And that alone becomes a pneumistic experience. So the interesting, fascinating conclusion is that the more you internalize, the more you come to realize that which is beyond. And the more you realize that which is beyond, the more you internalize it as well. Because they're both the reality of Atzmus, both relationship, closeness to us, lamata mata aden tachlis, and also absolute infinite distance, but not distance in a bad way, distance as being a complete mystery and mystique of something that's completely beyond us. And both are critical in joining together. I explained this a little, not in exact these words, yesterday in explaining lamata mata and lamayla mayla, why they're both necessary. So ultimately the oitzer, the treasure, is concealed, completely concealed. But it's revealed in time of war, when there's a real enemy, when there's a real battle. Then the deepest, this Helam will be revealed, and that's ultimately going to be the Ein Oid that we're going to learn about. How the Kalim themselves are not just revealing Oid, but how they reveal the Etzem, their Shadish, in the Helam Ha'atzmi that we're discussing here. So I'm giving a little preview of what's coming, but that's part of this whole conversation here, just to put it in a little more context.
This is very powerful. Is it correct to say that the Etzem O'er she'einoi b'chinas gilui klal is a memutza to the Etzem O'er shebo b'gilui?
Yeah, you could say that to some extent. We'll talk about that more later. I don't want to go so much into it, but in a way, yes, you could say that. And it goes both ways. Remember, the expression in the Zohar and Tikkun Zayar is interesting. Ein Sof l'mayla mayla aden ketz l'mata mata aden tachlis. The same Ein Sof. He doesn't say Ein Sof l'mayla mata aden ketz, and then there's another Ein Sof that's l'mata. The same Ein Sof has both elements because Eid is me'ein ha'moyer, so it has the element of gilui, which is l'mata mata aden tachlis. It also has the element of helam because Atzmus has helam, and Atzmus is beyond, I should say. Ein le'tchila, like the Rebbe says. So the same Eid Ein Sof, both manifests. That's why he calls it Eid. He keeps saying Helama Eid she'ena begeder gili klal. You could say if it's not begeder gili, why are you calling it Eid? Like you asked before, because at the end of the day, you want Helam is also a manifestation. It's just not a conscious manifestation. You could say it's the manifestation of mystique, of mystery, of awe, of being beyond. I mean, in many ways, it's when we say that the Tzimtzum reveals something about Atzmus that Gilui doesn't reveal. Like we learned before, that Kalim reveal the Atzmus that is completely beyond. Gilui reveals and is natural, expresses God's greatness. Hagilcha, Hashem, Agdula, Agvura, Tiferes, Anetzach, V'Ahoid, etc. But Tzimtzum Helam reveals God's Atzmius, the power to restrain. It's like the difference when you look at a wise person who's teaching. What do you learn from when he teaches? You learn the ideas that he's conveying. What about from his silence? What about the teacher when he exercises restraint? He doesn't answer a question, or he doesn't say everything. And you realize there's more here, but he's not saying. There's a deep wisdom to that too. Now, you may not understand it at the time, but over time, you can come to discover, I learned as much from my teacher's silence as I learned from his words, because both are conveying a truth. And the truth is that it's really higher than both silence and words, but you need both. You need Gilui, because without Gilui, there's no connection. There's no transmission. On the other hand, Tzimtzum or Eir or Helem, the Etzem, reveals a much more atzmizdika part. And they both complement each other and both are necessary ultimately. That's why Hayahu Ushmei Bolvad. We're told there's a Hu and there's a Shmei. You could ask a bigger question. If it's not revealed, how can we be talking about it all together? And the Rebbe Rashab is elaborating on a level that's completely not in the realm of revelation. He's revealing to us a level that's completely beyond revelation. That alone tells you something.
That's who, right? Not
exactly. That's who, exactly. That means we could talk about it, but you're talking about something that's beyond. Like I say, you could see God's face, but you can't be looking for it. It has to be, you have to put yourself aside, complete bittul, and then in a way you can experience. It's like I've mentioned many times, when you get completely absorbed and captivated by something beautiful, you lose yourself in it. And that's when you experience it. And someone will say, can you explain it? You say, no, I just completely was absorbed by it. It's just those magical moments people had by Fabrengens, or when you look Chassidus, or other things where you're not even thinking, like I mentioned many times, not like you're sitting and saying, oh, I'm going to tell everybody how about this tremendous experience. You're so in the moment, completely taken by it. There's no thoughts altogether. There's no thoughts, there's no words, there's no documentation, there's no videoing. It's just, you're in the experience, completely one with it. Then afterwards, you could say, I just had an experience which is undescribable. I have no words, and that type of idea. And at the same time, we also want Gilui. So you see, they're constantly going back, Riyah, Shmiyah, and the different expressions for these two types of realities. And they're both necessary, absolutely necessary. It's not like one can be without the other. At the end, that's why we need everything. I think this is going to ultimately explain the Tanya. I'm happen to be teaching it now, and I'm thinking about it a lot. What neshamas are, what Torah mitzvahs are. Because Torah, like when chapter Perek Hey and Tanya, is about the yichud nifla, the ultimate, the awesome and the unbelievable unity, fusion, and merging of a mind with God. So on one hand, that's achdus. At the same time, there's also an element that's beyond that. The Eibush is less machshava tvisa beklal, but through Torah you're tefersim. So a combination of both the pnimius and as well as experiencing something that is completely beyond. Maybe the neshamas. We're going to learn soon about neshamas.
This is
this for
fascination.
One second. One at a time. What?
But you said before that the oil is reflecting the Einoi Tchilot. This is amazing.
The Rebbe says that in Pei. That's in Tavshin Chav Beis, yeah. Yeah, Tavshin Chav Beis. The Maimer, he talks about that at length. How the Eir is not just Eir Mein HaMoyer in Ein Sof, but also Ein Leitchila. Get us the Simon Chav, that the Koyach HaEin Sof of Atzmus, which is Hu Levade B'Koyche, travels through Eir Shu Mein HaMoyer. That's what he says in Geras HaKedesh.
So is this where we get, I think it's in this year's Abasi Lagani, where the notion, or maybe it was something you said yesterday, that you can find Atzmus in the Kalim, and that because the Kalim, especially Tachlis, to the very bottom, where there's a Helam, a complete concealment, you can find Atzmus because Atzmus is ultimate Helam, it's concealed from us. So even though you might think that Atzmus is all the way up, at the highest level, ultimately, because it's ultimately hidden, it's also below, at the lowest part. And so
I'm not clear. I'm not understanding really what you're saying.
You understand what I'm saying? I thought you said yesterday that you can you can connect with Atzmus in this world, in the Kalim, that the Kalim themselves can be revelatory, ultimately, that the Helam will be Matzil.
That's correct.
Can I give an
And
example?
That's correct. That's correct. I did
But
say
that
that.
essentially,
That's
right,
essentially
but that-
from the Mimer in 1982, Ayin Beis. Yeah, I said that. Yeah,
so that,
but that's not what we're
it's-
discussing right now. To be honest, right now he's discussing actually oir. We're talking here oir, but it's correct. We're going to get to that. That's the ein oid, that the containers, the kalim, are rooted in the rishima, which is higher than the root of the oir. Yeah,
right.
that's correct.
Yeah, no, I know it wasn't exactly what you were talking about.
No,
Before
I'm
you
saying
were
that's
saying, yeah,
no, but
yeah,
I'm saying what you're saying is correct. I'm
Okay.
confirming it.
okay.
Reshimu, but Atmos,
So the Rishimu reveals, like he said, if you go back to page where is it? Yeah, on page 1270. So he says the and he says about how it reveals a deeper dimension of Atzmus. So there he doesn't speak about Ein Le'Tchila and the idea of Mitzusim Atzmusei. That's dafka in the Yesh. But ultimately, there he speaks more that it's the Sheresh HaKelim is Mitzusim Atzmus Mechlachus as Kol Yochel on page 1270. It's connected. But right now, yes, I wouldn't mix the Ein Le'Tchila with the Sheresh HaKelim completely, but it is connected ultimately. Because the Sheresh HaKelim is more revealing that God can create something that's not like himself, meaning that's not a gilui, like he says there. But the Yesh is even further. The Yesh ein le'ilav asiba. The Yesh does not feel about a goshosei that it has a cause. And that's dafka from Atzmus. And so really what we're dealing here with is Atzmus Ata, that's ein le'tchila, who, Helam be'etzem, and Havaya or Shmoi, gilui. All levels of gilui. And you really need all three. The Ata is beyond everything. But it's the who that we connect with the Shmoi through mitzvahs that we're going to learn. And then through Tuhu, through Neshamas, ultimately reveals Ata in all forms and fashions. I was just connecting with the Maimon and Basilagani, Tavshin Chav Beis, where the Rebbe connects that the Oyer also has the Me'ein HaMoyer, also the Ein Le'Tchila, the Mitzusim Atzmusei, is also travels through the Oyer. It's not Oyer Mitzad Atzmei, but the Oyer also carries that. That's what I was focusing on before, and saying that connected somewhat to Lamai Aden Ketz, as it is in Lamata Mata Aden Tachlis. That in the Oyer, in Gilu, you also have an element of Atzmi. That was the point I was trying to make, the Oitzer, so to speak. Even though, as I said, I haven't seen it explicit, but it seems that's the pshat in some ways.
You told us one time that there are three names, Mitzius and Atzmusa and Mitzius built in Mitzius Nimtzo. What is the third one?
Mechuyev HaMetzius. Yeah. Okay, so we finished here. We'll stop here at the end of the paragraph, middle paragraph on page 1285. The next paragraph is going to come back to mitzvahs. Fascinating stuff, no? Amazing stuff.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Unbelievable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This whole discussion, Rabbi, that has been on the level of who, right? We're not talking about Ata yet, Ein Techila. The Helam or Helam Etzem, that's all level of who, is that correct? Not
Yeah.
Ata.
No, correct. I was talking about Ata a bit because he mentions Ata, but I agree. We have to keep this very careful. Let's stick to who and Shmoi. We'll talk about Ata. We have already.
Yeah, it got confusing because you mentioned Atta to this, which when I would have thought you'd say who, but you said Atta. That's what was confusing.
No, because I was saying that Helema Etzem reveals something about Ata that is completely beyond, and Havaya or Shmoi reveals the Gilui of Ata. And Helam reveals the Helam of Ata, if you wish, something like that. In other words, Ata is beyond both, but each one of them reveals, expresses another dimension of Atzma's power to conceal, Atzma's power to reveal. That's what I was referring to. We'll talk about it some more. It's if you think, but correct. We're talking about the Helam as in the who, correct. See this. Well, what a gift.
It reminds me, Jacobson, of the rabbi I know, who said that when he met all these Gedolim, he was always impressed, of course, they were much higher than him. But he always felt that, if he learned more, he studied 23 hours a day rather, it was in the getter. And then when he met the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he realized that no matter what he learned his whole life, there was something about the Rebbe that was unreachable. And, that level that's just the genius, or the level of that's not in the getter. And when you really think about that, as you call it, the manifestation of the mystique, of that, that realization that there's just something here that's just not in your level, or you can't relate to it. That pure knowledge of that affects your receptance of whatever the Giloy that they are revealing to you, meaning that
100%, and there's no question about it. That's the paradox. That the more you, in a way, tachlis hayediyah shalei neda, the more you get to that shalei neda, the more you feel it, the more you actually internalize that and the Giluim, correct? That's the interesting twist here. Yeah. And actually it's a gift, because if God had said to Moshe Rabbeinu, hey, let me show you myself, he would never really have seen God. He would have seen God on his terms. So it's actually the Helam, that the restraint, the concealment, that reveals more about him than if he actually showed you who he is. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Knowing by not knowing.
Yeah, but that itself is the gift. Because sometimes someone says, okay, tell me your secret. You tell him the secret and he thinks he knows. He doesn't really know, because there's some things that, and that is, it's really the beautiful combination of bittul and mitzias in the ultimate way, that you always retain the bittul. You don't never feel, oh, I got it, I have it all figured out. Knowing that you don't is part of figuring it out too. It's like maturity. Try to explain to a 15-year-old, a 10-year-old, what is marriage? What is having children? What is the mystery? All the unknowns of life that we grow up with, and then we suddenly realize that a lot of things we don't have figured out. You can't even explain. It's not together. You can't explain to a child what maturity is. It's just not possible. It's experience that teaches you things, teaches you that there are the nuances, the gray areas, the areas that you'll never really fully understand, and that you completely embrace that. That's not a problem. It's like someone will say, what do you mean? You're not going to understand certain things? The older I get, the more I'll understand. You come to realize the older you get, the less you understand. But that alone means that alone means you understand more. The more you understand, the less you understand. Let's put it that way. And that's very hard to explain to someone who doesn't even understand what that means, because they're not, they're not there. You think back when you were 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years, you think you knew it all, It's just a part of the experience. It's, yeah.
Sure. Very well said.
Are you going to be giving classes all week long? Are you missing a class by your trip to California?
Yeah, there's going to be. I have no choice because I'm traveling Wednesday morning. So tomorrow will be a class. Wednesday, I'm out of here. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. No classes from my end. Doesn't mean you can't come together and learn. But I'm just traveling. I have, let me just end the recording. I'll give you the